This is Raul Lopez, and you're listening to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish? The path to success isn't easy. For minorities and people of color, many attempt this journey with little to no guidance. Join me as I sit down with individuals who share their stories of perseverance so that together we can learn how to say success in Spanglish. What's good, mi gente? It's your boy Raul. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me here on How Do You Say Success in Spanglish. Today on the show, I have a very special guest, Marco Benitez, Burnout and Authenticity Coach. How's it going, Marco?
Very good, man. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, same thing. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. So just to kind of give a little intro on Marco, Marco is a transformational burnout coach who has dedicated his life to helping healthcare professionals find balance and fulfillment in their lives and careers, whether they're currently experiencing burnout or are nearing it. Having walked the path of burnout as a physician assistant, Marco deeply understands the unique pressures you face in your role. His mission is to empower people to embrace their true selves, unlocking their unique talents and harness their innate passions and strengths to create a life and career that brings joy, fulfillment, and that inspires others. Marco, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yo, thank you. I really appreciate you that you took the time out today to get on here. And so I guess to kind of start off, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Marco Benitez?
No, you covered so much of it in the intro.
Oh, there we go. It's over. Thank you for coming on.
Game over.
Game
Thanks.
over. Yeah.
That's it. Don't forget, tip your waitress.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I'm born and raised in New York. I consider myself a native New Yorker. Just a guy trying to figure it out as he goes along. My passion has always been in medicine, and somewhere along the beginnings of my path in medicine, I felt a deeper calling. And that transitioned me little by little into coaching.
Nice. And so, yeah, so obviously you do a lot of stuff with coaching now. You did physician assistant. It's a long journey from where you've came and to getting to becoming a physician assistant. And I want to make sure I don't say physician's assistant so nobody gets mad at me. Physician assistant, and then ultimately into coaches. So tell me, you come from New York. What was life growing up in New York for you?
It was good. I consider myself a child of the 90s. I was born in the late 70s. But, my time when I was in my teens, my teen years was in the 90s. So,
nice.
Depending on who you talk to, they'll tell you that music peaked in the 90s. I'm one of those people that believes that.
Yeah, no, I agree too. So, yeah.
90s hip hop, 90s R&B, it's unlike anything, And so that defined a lot of my growing up. We got out there, me and the fellows from the block, and we just explored all parts of New York, mostly Queens, because that's where I was born and raised.
Okay, nice. And so ultimately you decided to become a physician assistant. Is that something you always wanted to be? Did you always know medicine was something you were interested in early on, or did that something that come in later on?
I always like facts, science, things like that. I remember in grade school, my classmates were taking out books like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, and I was taking out books on volcanoes and dinosaurs and space. So I always knew that science was something that really resonated with me. Medicine didn't come up until much later. After high school, I decided to explore the career in pre-hospital care, emergency medicine as an EMT. So I got certified as an EMT. I actually worked for the FDNY, so I was responding to 911 calls in New York City.
Oh, nice.
I was pulling out people from car wrecks and all the bad stuff you would imagine people are calling for.
Yep.
I worked in the South Bronx. I worked in Brooklyn North, which is areas like Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and Bed-Stuy, which is nothing like it is today.
Yeah.
Today you can go for a stroll at any time in those areas.
My wife's from Williamsburg too, so she tells me how different it was from back in the day. So yeah, it's like
oh yeah. No, I had butcher knives pulled out on me. There were people chasing after us with clubs, bats, whatever. It was different, and that's that we were in full uniform. They didn't care.
Yeah.
But so it was a lot different. So that was my first step into the medical field, and I remember the first day at my Brooklyn facility that I was assigned to. I was working with this really nice guy. I can't remember his name. And we were just chatting it up. I was young. I started when I was 20. I had just turned 20. And we were talking in the ambulance, just waiting for our next job. And he says, you know what? You remind me a lot of myself. He says, I'm going to give you a very good piece of advice. He says, quit this job as fast as you can. I said, what? He's like, quit. He's like, get out of this job. He said, because I was the same person sitting right there where you are, saying exactly what you were saying. He says, and now 10 years later, I have a mortgage, I have a wife, I have a beautiful daughter. He's like, and I can't go anywhere. So he says, right now, you don't have any of that. He's like, get out of here as fast as you can and pursue that career in medicine that you want to pursue.
And how did that make you feel?
Well, when he said get out, I was like, dang, I thought he was trying to kick me out the ambulance, in that moment. So that was my first reaction. Again, I was kind of naive. It was my first real job. The only
Mhm,
job I had before that was a cashier at Key Food up until that point.
mhm,
So, I felt a little out of my place there. I'm sure there was a lot of imposter syndrome going on. Everybody was, well grown up, and I'm just out of my teen years.
mhm.
Um, but it was good advice. I started doing school part-time pretty much maybe a couple of months after he said that. Started doing school part-time, college part-time, and I just knew that I was not moving at a pace that I would want it to move in order to achieve the goals that I had. So I wound up taking a leave of absence, and then eventually just did college full-time.
Okay, and is that when you started doing the physician assistant aspect of things, or you were still after that?
No, no, no. So when I started college, I started a little bit later. I didn't start college until I was 23. So I had done a couple of years on the ambulance. So I started college around 23, and my major was in laboratory science. So eventually I earned a Bachelor of Science, and it's a long drawn out name, but it's medical biology with a specialization in biomedical technology.
Mhm.
I minored in pre-med, and I wound up working for the university as an EMT as well on the ambulance. And so that got me some perks as being an employee for the university. So I stayed also for the master's and did a master's essentially in the same thing, just with a concentration in medical chemistry and a minor in hematology. So, boring nerd stuff, but it was fascinating to me. Um, and it was in that transition from bachelor's to master's that I realized, okay, bachelor's degree, I don't want to do laboratory medicine. So I was going to get into a program. It's highly specialized. There's like 100 applicants, they accept seven. And somehow I got in. So I got accepted to the program, and then I withdrew from the program like 4 days before it started. Because there was something inside of me that said, that's not the path for you. That's not the path for you. And I lost some money on the deposit, and the director of the program, was pretty much yelling at me for 45 minutes on the phone, trying to convince me to come back to the program. It started off with, is something wrong? Then it started trying to convince me. And then it finished up with, you stole somebody's spot and
Oh,
somebody could have
no.
taken it. Yeah. So I felt horrible. But I just something in me even though I was moving forward with it, something in me was like, that's not the path for you, not the path for you. So I walked away,
The
you know.
it's a hard thing, it's probably especially at that point in your life for a lot of us to listen to our instincts, was it what was that buildup for you to realize and say, "Okay, I gotta get off, it's just piss or get off the pot." Like, no, I gotta make this move.
Yeah, the timeline was moving very quickly.
Mhm,
The timeline moved very quickly. The program was introduced to me by one of my professors, and the program was called cardiovascular perfusion technologists. So
mhm,
essentially, these are the technicians that work the heart lung machine. So when you're doing bypass surgeries, when you're doing an open heart surgery, you have to disconnect the blood flow from the heart because they're working on the heart, and it has to go into the bypass machine. So that program was to train you how to work that machine. It was like it's a whole degree just to run that machine. Um, the money was good, but when I observed one day, I realized the lifestyle, just the way the job was, what the job entailed. And it wasn't so much the complexities of the job because, like I took all these nerd classes anyway. So I was just going to just continue. Why stop now? But what really lacked for me was this lack of human connection. Outside of talking with your coworkers and having the surgeon, you know, yell out orders to you in
mhm,
order to restart the flow and so on and so forth, there was no real human element where I can make a human connection. And it's funny because I never thought of it about it until now that I'm telling you, but that's something that really came up again in my transition from being a PA and into going and choosing to go into coaching. So I guess we'll get into that in a little bit. But that was the deciding factor. I realized that I was just going to be engaging with my colleagues, but I was not going to be engaging with patients, and that was something that was important to me. Just making a real human connection with someone. And
Mhm.
then the timeline was moving so quick that I just had to jump on it and say, I got to make this hard decision.
I got you. I got you. And
Yeah.
so what did you do next after that?
So I switched the major into the other master's, which was in the laboratory science.
Hmm.
Um, I just did my best effort there, but at that point, I was already looking into going into PA school.
Hmm.
So I was looking into different physician assistant programs, um, and I applied to like two or three, but I missed like one deadline. And so there was like one school left that I had not heard back from, which was St. John's University.
Hmm.
And then actually, it wasn't St. John's at the time. I'm probably dating myself at this point. There were there were Catholic medical centers, which was in conjunction with St. John's University, and I got into that program. And halfway through my program, Catholic Medical Center sold the program to St. John's University officially. And so, lucky for me, then I get a certificate from St. John's University. So, looks better on a resume.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nice.
Yeah.
And so, during this time where you're doing all this things in college and getting your master's, is this kind of where you started dealing with some of the major aspects of burnout, especially in the medical field that's it's so prevalent?
No,
No.
no. And it's because I was not aware and exposed to that that I probably moved forward so eagerly, like, or clicking my heels, like I found my field, I found my field. Because
Hmm.
I think that if I would have seen that, I probably would have pulled back and thought twice about going into medicine as a provider. So that's the interesting part. I didn't see it. I didn't see it when I applied to the program. I didn't see it all throughout the entire program. I didn't see it when I graduated until about 4 or 5 years after I was working in the profession. And it's worse that it happened then. It's worse that it happened then. Because at that point, I'm getting 5 years of paychecks. At that point, I'm getting 5 years of status. Patients looking up to me. Thank you for your help. I was working in a private practice. I'm going out to all these pharmaceutical dinners. I'm eating at five-star restaurants for free because the pharmaceutical reps would take us out.
Nice.
you know I'm having all these experiences, and it was then that I started to realize, like, something does not feel right on many levels for me. I will never speak bad about the profession. It's a fantastic profession, not just for those in it, but for the care, the patient care, and the service they provide to people in need. So never speak bad about the profession. Something just did not sit right with me around that time. And it was around that 5 year mark that I started to feel like, man, why am I tired all the time?
Hmm.
Why am I so not motivated? Why am I eating all this crappy food all the time? Why am I having wine so often to relax and unwind? Why is Sunday so irritating and bothersome and frustrating to me? Sunday nights, the sun goes down and the stress starts to go up. Why is it that I go on vacation, 1 week vacation, I can't relax into the vacation till the third day? And by the fourth and fifth day, I'm already anticipating the stress that I'm going to come back to. So I couldn't walk away from the job. So it was worse that it happened then. But it's a good question. Did I see the burnout in the beginning and that's what got me interested? No, because I would not have been interested. I would have been scared away.
Cheers. Yeah. It's like one of those when you go for a job interview and everybody's like, "Oh, this company's great and everything's amazing and everybody's awesome," and then like you go there for the first day where actually work, they're like, "Dude, get out now!" It's you're
Yes.
that guy in your ambulance telling you to leave. Like it's like
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because I used to do, keep it vague because I don't want to point fingers at any
Sure.
place in
Hmm.
particular, but I used to do interviews for medical providers for a company, and I was selling it to them, but there was a lot of the same complaints coming back from people, and I started to sweat like, oh my gosh, I'm interviewing people and telling them all the great things about the company because that's what I have to do, but I know that there's a lot more behind the scenes.
Hmm. And I know in medicine, in any type of health aspect, it's a lot of hours. It's a lot of, you know, long shifts repetitively throughout the week where you're nonstop, and then you go home and sleep for a day and you come back for another, 2 days on, some things like that. And so, I can't imagine the type of stress that you deal with, and especially and so they're not showing it to you early on, and you're going in there and you have to deal with that stress. Like, I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it or whatever. So I'm glad that you were able to take from that and kind of move on for it and do that. But so you started working initially as a PA, and what was that like initially when you first started?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. That whole scenario of the long hours and lack of sleep and waking up. You're describing my clinical year when I was finishing up school. You have
Hmm.
that 1 year of internship in the
Hmm.
program. So you described my OBGYN rotation
Hmm.
where I had what they call call when you take call. So call is not that you're on call and you got to come in. Call is that you got to stay there.
Hmm.
So imagine we went into work today at 5 in the morning, and I didn't leave tomorrow until 10 a.m., 10:30 in the morning. Like that was my shift. And in OBGYN, um, there you were really on edge. There's a room you can go to rest, but they use pagers in the hospital, so they would page you, and then you got to deliver a baby in the middle of the night. So like push, push, and you're trying to be all, in it, but you're like running on 44 minutes of sleep,
Hmm.
for the whole night. And, congratulations, it's a girl, unless if I cut off the wrong cord, it's
Hmm.
kind of like one of those situations. Um, but starting the work and after I finished was really great. I worked in private practice. I didn't think I was going to like that setting as much.
Hmm.
So I worked in primary care, internal medicine. I was doing primary care for quite some time. And it was good because I had worked in a uniform for most of my EMT career, and then I was in, scrubs in the hospitals. And it was nice to finally wear some dress clothes and put on a white coat. And I had business cards and I had a desk. And, I thought I was like como gente grande,
Oh,
for the
yeah,
first
yeah.
time in my life. I was like, wow, and in that setting, because you can follow up with people, I had that opportunity to engage and to follow through their progress, through the ups and downs that they were going through. And you have those proverbial moments of thank you for helping me, if it wasn't for you kind of moments. And we don't see it that way. That's just our job. People are grateful, but sometimes they bring you fruit baskets
Hmm.
or a bottle of wine during the holidays. And I had a patient who was a butcher. I had a patient who was a butcher. He's like, come to my butcher shop. So I showed up there, and the guy gave me like this ridiculous deal. I remember it was like grilling for like 4th of July.
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, if somebody's like, hey, doc, how are you? They called us doc. Even though
Yeah.
we're PA, they called us doc. Hey, doc, how are you? He stopped what he's doing. He's like, tell me what you want. I'm like, look, I got X amount of people. I need a nice mix of stuff. He's like, don't worry. Dude filled up shopping bags. I think it had to be maybe about, it felt like weights. They felt like weights. It was like, no lie, there was probably at least 30 to 40 pounds of meat
Mhm.
between those two bags,
No.
ribs and steaks. I'm like, wow, I love my life. And I got into my first nice car because I had only had beat up used cars up until then. Um, so it was good. It was good until it wasn't.
Yeah, and I was
It
gonna
was
ask you
good
too,
until it wasn't.
one of the things you mentioned earlier was that you didn't have the human interaction in that first set when you were studying, whatever the blood thingy, the blood thing I call
Yeah,
the blood, the blood stuff. And so
right.
were you getting that level, that aspect of satisfaction from the as a PA?
Yes, yes. But it's funny because that I don't know if I don't know if need is the right word,
Mhm.
but that affinity for a deep human connection started to evolve a lot more.
Hmm.
So I was getting that in the beginning because it was so much different from the ambulance. In the ambulance, I'm with the person 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour on a long job. You talk with them, you never see them again. Never see them again. In the school program, it was a little bit different because again, get a little more time with them because you're at a place, at a clinic or at a hospital. But again, you're only there for a short period of time training. In the office, it was also the same thing. Now I had a longer period of time, but now the way I was connecting changed because there was a point, and I want to choose my words carefully because I don't want to sound as though I'm speaking out against um, the medical profession or the way medicine is practiced. But for myself, I found that I felt a deeper connection and my patients were more receptive and voiced more positive feedback when I stopped jotting the notes and was not so interested in writing the prescriptions, but rather when I put down the pen and I engaged in active listening and in uncovering where is this all coming from? Because it was there for the first time that I started to realize that many people tend to manifest physical symptoms for reasons that are not explained by physical causality, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
And again, this is not a blanket statement saying that everything is psychogenic in nature, but I did find certain patterns and I became very astute at identifying them and asking the right questions to the right people at the right time. And it would help me uncover more. So the depth and the profundity of that human connection evolved. And when it got to that point, it really started to make my practice of medicine less fulfilling because it seemed a little bit more business-like
Hmm.
and a little bit more routine and robotic, so to speak. And for me, that just wasn't something that ignited me like it used to.
Hmm. And what ultimately triggered that transition for you to start wanting to leave being a PA and start becoming ultimately what you become a coach?
Yeah. So the transition is still ongoing, believe it or not,
Hmm.
because it's not that I have a disdain or dislike for the medical profession. It's just not something I want to depend on to provide for the rest of my life. There's a
Hmm.
lot of limitations within my personal profession. Um, there are certain economic ceilings. There are certain practice barriers that I have. So I don't have the 100% autonomy and freedom that we'll say a physician, an MD or a DO has, or even at least in New York, nurse practitioners have. The legislation's a little bit different. So there's more restrictions for me within my professional title. But I love practicing medicine. It provides me what I call the mental calisthenics.
Hmm.
I'm able to problem solve, piece things together, provide solutions. So I still like that. So the transition is still ongoing, but the transition began, the bug, as I'll call it, they started kind of nudging. That bug started around like that fifth year. The transition out of it, the very, very beginnings probably happened about maybe 3 to 4 years after that. Maybe about 3 years after that. The beginnings of it, because it didn't start with, I want to be a coach. No, it started with this really deep desire for personal development, deepening my spirituality, understanding um, life purpose, understanding what are my abilities, my gifts, my talents, things that come natural to me. What are the most common things that people are always telling me that I do well, that attract them to me as a provider? Um, so it was a few years of really soul searching, so to speak, and that personal development, a lot of reading, lot of thinking, beginning to meditate, things like that.
It's a funny way that you put it, where one of the things you just mentioned was that finally starting to listen to people, what they were telling me I'm good at, or my strengths are, and it's something I think a lot of us never do for a long time. We just keep our head down and keep working. And so that kind of resonated with me a lot in my life, because it's the same thing. You start doing stuff now and you're like, you know you should have been doing this for years. It's something you're good at, and something I've told you for
Yeah.
a while. So no, but one of the things I did read that was in your bio is that you mentioned you had a conversation with your parents that helped you discover your true calling. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't think I had a conversation with my parents per se. I didn't have a conversation with them really. No,
Okay,
I don't think
we'll
I
move
don't think
on.
I've
It was something I read on your website, so I'm not gonna.
really. I gotta check my website then. Jesus. If that's there, I gotta update it.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. Let's move on. I'll put all politically on it. Okay. But okay. So once you've officially put your foot in the water and you start deciding I'm going this route, what were some of the things you had to do to start getting into becoming a coach?
Yeah, the first things I had to do was wrestle with internal barriers. That was the first thing,
Hmm.
because there's a whole bunch of questions that come into play when you make the decision to walk away from a profession that you just spent 8 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition dollars to get into, and say, yeah, I don't like it. I want to do something else. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was married at the time. So I had to think about the familial repercussions. I had my son, who was just a couple of years old at that time. So I had to think about the parental implications of that, the provider stuff,
Hmm.
I had to think of. It wasn't the kind of thing where, um, yeah, I'm just going to do this. Had I been single, it probably would have just been a little bit more abrupt about the transition.
Hmm.
But that was the first thing. Number one was that. The second was my own feelings on public perception. What are people going to say when I tell them I'm a coach, and they don't even know what that is, and they're going to think that I'm aloof, and are you crazy? You went all this time in school and you want to do coaching? You want to be a life coach?
Hmm.
you know so that was the first part. That was the first obstacle, was battling all this internal stuff. Um and the one conversation I did have was with my wife at the time, and asking her, and I kind of just laid it out to her. I said, look, here's where I feel like I could apply all of it. And I played around with a bunch of stuff. I'm like, maybe I should go to medical school and now get my MD license, and
Hmm.
maybe I should go into psychology and become a psychologist and all this stuff. And then eventually I landed into the coaching. And I remember I had told my wife at the time, I said, look, here's where I feel I could use everything that I've been born with and everything that I've learned and the ways that I feel I could connect with people. Here's the financial investment it's going to take for me to attend this program, which is like the number one program in the world. I wanted to go to the best. So I
Hmm.
wanted to go to that program. Here's the financial investment. I said, if you feel it's okay for me to do this, and the financial investment, here's how I would finance it. If you're okay with it, let me know and I'll move forward. But if you're not okay with it, I completely understand and I'll let it go.
Hmm.
And she supported me and she said, yeah, move forward with it. And so I did. And so I did. So I applied to the program. I got in. It was called the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. It's IPEC for short. It's considered, at least at the time, the number one coaching program in the world. Um, it was a long program. I forgot how many hours it was, but it was a lot of hours. And it was broken up over several months. They had modules and you did coaching in between. It was very hands-on and
Hmm.
intensive. And yeah, so I did the training. That was in 2016. That was in 2016.
Were you
And
still working
so
as a PA while you were doing that, or was that just kind of
yeah,
so you were doing
yeah.
both, juggling both?
Yeah, I was working as a PA. I didn't mention that I started a recruiting company when I finished school,
Huh.
and I was still trying to recruit. So I was trying to handle that, and I was trying to be, a present husband. I was trying to be a present father. Um, by 2016, I had already had my daughter, so now we had both kids at the time.
Hmm.
Um, so there was a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
There was a lot to juggle.
Speaking about burnout, right? That's
Yeah,
it's a lot.
exactly.
It's a lot.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly.
and when you were doing this, did you know burnout on authenticity was what you wanted to focus on, or were you kind of still trying to figure that out?
So no, I didn't know that I wanted to focus on both. My message of the message of authenticity has always been there from the beginning, but I never realized it until maybe a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
I had always talked about it, but I never put it under that one word, authenticity. I created other words around it. I would do descriptors, but I never consolidated into that one word. Burnout, I knew because at that point I had already experienced burnout
Yep.
big time, big time. I was had biggest big time, and I left the job and before I went into the coaching, so I knew that. But I didn't focus in on that just yet.
Hmm.
When I eventually started doing the coaching again, I tried different monikers. I started with I'm a peak performance coach. Um, I'm a what did I say? I'm a life coach for uh, professionals who want to be present for their families. Like I came up with a whole bunch of different things. Um, and it wasn't until about maybe 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, that I really started to just narrow it down to just really become accepting of the two things, mostly authenticity, and then there's burnout. At my core, even within burnout coach, is authenticity coaching. I could explain that to you, I guess, in a little bit when we get to that, so I don't jump around too much. But um, that's where they came together. In my mind, it was definitely authenticity is the core message, but how do I market a term which by definition means it is different for every person. And when you do marketing 101, you have to find that one message, the core message, and
Hmm.
the thing that applies. Who's your ideal customer avatar? Where do they shop? What do they buy? What car do they drive? Where do they hang out? But by authenticity, I can't do that. I never figured out how to do that. Because if, you know, being an executive is authentic to you, being a simple person who doesn't have a high profile job like that might not be authentic to them. They just want to have a peaceful job that they're happy with and make enough to pay the bills, you know. And then you have someone where authenticity is, hey, I want to be present for my family, but I also want to have a hobby that means something to me.
Hmm.
So burnout eventually became that case, that shell that encompassed everything that I could market into uh, one solid stream. So it's burnout coaching for healthcare professionals right now, but at the core of it, it's all authenticity.
Yeah, and so let's move right into it, man, and let's talk about burnout and authenticity. Like how are they related, and how did that come together? So.
So the first thing to understand is that stress and burnout are not the same thing.
Hmm.
It's a very important distinction to make. People say at work, "Oh, I'm burnt out." They may be burnt out, but they also may not be burnt out. Just like when we say, "Oh, I'm starving," you're not starving. You just, you just can't get to Chipotle fast enough.
Yeah.
Like you're not starving. There are people that are starving. There are people that are burnt out. Burnout is now considered to be a medical diagnosis. Burnout has several criteria. They call it three dimensions. So the first is um, exhaustion. The second one is disinterest, and the third one is detachment from engagement at work. Essentially, the reason why you went into that job in the first place is lost to you. So there's three dimensions to burnout. Burnout is what happens when stress is left unchecked for a prolonged period of time. That period of time is not uniform, it's not universal, it's different for each person. It depends what has stressed you out, what that stressor means to you, and how present that stress has been throughout your experience. In the beginnings of when burnout was coined, which is back in the 70s, this guy named Herbert Freudenberger, he wrote this paper called The High Cost of High Achieving, where he coined the term burnout for the first time. Uh, it was described, and even up until recently, it's described as a workplace phenomenon. We know now that burnout is not isolated to the workplace. It is something that has its place in not just work, but there's also people that have burnout in their personal lives. There's caregiver burnout. Caregiver burnout's a huge thing.
Hmm.
So people that have elderly parents that have medical issues, or they have children with special needs, they have a burnout probably even more intense than people at work, because whether as much as a person feels that they can't quit their job or not, you can quit a job.
Hmm.
As much as, oh, I can't. No, you can literally just go in there and say, I quit. That's it. I'm not saying there's not going to be repercussions and your life's not going to fall apart and you can't pay your bills, but you can absolutely go into a job and say, I quit. That's it. For people that have parents with medical conditions, children with special needs, they cannot quit. They can't quit. So, how does this all tie into authenticity? It's my belief that every single person who suffers from burnout has at least one moment where they start to question, is this really what I should be doing with my life? Is this really the best use of my talents, my skills, my ability? Was there a path that I felt deep within me that I wanted to walk down and I chose a different one and here I am? So these existential questions are really rooted in authenticity. Because if it was just a matter of talking to the boss and oh, could you delegate some responsibilities to someone else, and maybe I need a couple of days off, then it would be a lot easier to manage. But burnout, and this is something that's going to blow your mind, burnout is actually shown to change the structures of your brain.
Oh, shit.
MRIs that were done on people with burnout shows that there are structures of the brain that shrink within the brain in people with burnout.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Mm.
not stress,
Yeah.
burnout.
Burnout.
Yeah, and when you have something in Spanish, well, we're talking Spanglish here, so that's cool. We can do this. So there's a saying in Spanish that says "uno se enferma de los nervios,"
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
My
It's
mom
uno
says
se
that all the
enferma.
time.
Yes, ay, te vas a enfermar de los nervios. And
Hmm.
then you get some weird patients like mine. They say, hey, tengo diabetes emocional. I don't know about that, but I don't know about that. I've heard that quite a few times. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have diabetes emocional. That's not a real thing, um, but burnout actually is enfermándose de los nervios.
Hmm.
You really are, because it not only changes the structure of your brain, it changes your sleep pattern, it changes your behavior, it can alter your personality, it can cause hormonal fluctuations. So it's really, really, really something that, I mean, I hesitate to call it a killer, but in some cultures, they actually have a word for it:
Hmm.
death by overwork. In Japan, they call it gorosi, if I'm not mistaken. In China, it's guarosa, and then in Korean, I forget the word, but it's some variant of that.
Hmm.
But they have a word for that:
Yep.
death by overwork.
No.
So at the core of burnout is something deeper within oneself to be authentic, to do something that really resonates with their authentic self. And that's how I find the correlation between the two. So when I find someone that's burnt out, I can find someone that needs coaching around their authenticity. That's how I solve the problem of marketing authenticity.
Yeah. And for Latinos, I think being a Latino, especially an immigrant as well, the idea of you work, you work regardless of whether you like it or not. You work whether it's fulfilling, whether or not it's giving you what you want. You just work. You need to put food on the table, and that's what's important for you. And then everything else is supplemental and can fall by the wayside. And do you tend to find that sort of mentality kind of helps drive eventually people into burnout?
I would say it can be a contributing factor. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I never realized that until I started working as a PA. And my jobs up until maybe 12 years into it, all my jobs up until then were all in Spanish speaking communities, because I spoke Spanish. So that's what got me in.
Yep.
And what I came to realize is that the life of a Latino in the United States is a life of work and it's a life of struggle for those that immigrate here.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I want to tread lightly around this topic because currently there's this whole thing going on with the migrants, and I know there's a lot of strong opinions there. But what I will just highlight is just a couple of the patterns that I had seen is that you have some you have a person that comes in seeking a better life because they were told by someone it's a better life, which in many respects probably is. But an underestimation of the amount of work that it takes
Mhm.
to make ends meet, at least in New York. I can only comment about New York. And New York is freaking expensive. As a matter of fact, I just saw an article yesterday that says that the cost of living required for a family of four to live comfortably in New York is about 319,000 a year.
Oof.
Yeah, and for a single person, I think it's like 217,000. So you have someone that comes in not speaking the language, someone that wants to work, but the amount of work that they do does not yield enough income to provide a comfortable life. And so many times they have to take on two jobs. And so they have kids at home. So they put them in the schools. But because they work so much, they can't be at home with the kids the way they would be normally in their own countries. And so they find that the kids are finding their own path, but they get mixed up in sometimes the wrong crowds, which then leads the kids down the wrong path, which leads to more stress from the parents. Now the kids don't think that the parents get it because the kids have a more Americanized mentality. And then it just becomes a very difficult and challenging situation. And I saw patient after patient after patient with the same struggle. Ay, mi hijo, ay, que mi hija esta cosa, ay,
Mhm.
que el jefe que nunca me da un día libre, que tuve que pedirle libre para solo tengo 3 horas para ir a esta cita médica.
Yep.
Like you got 3 hours to come to a medical visit, and that's it. And at the clinic that I worked at, it was walk-in. So it was 2 hours waiting time. So you got people coming to the front desk, please, 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 I have to go back to work. And so they're not there to parent the kids. They barely make enough money. They don't have time for themselves. On the downtime they do have, then they have to do oficios en la casa, right? We all know
Mhm.
about oficios en la casa, right? So you gotta wash the floor, and in our culture, like the house is clean, impeccable. That's just how it is.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's what I came to observe. Again, it's in my own experience, and it's in the people that I interact with, and I don't make a generalization as to every uh, person with whom immigrates into the country, but for the many that I encountered, that shared their story with me, that I saw their stresses, that I had to try and help them in whatever way that I could within my role. Absolutely. That was one of the biggest factors, at least for them, leading to burnout. And then the question is, where do you go from there? Where do you go? Do you quit a job and that makes end meet so that way you could, raise your kids? You could be more present in their life. How do you check your kids' homework when you don't understand the language? How do you advocate to the school for being fair? How can you get a full story when your kid comes home and says, "Oh, I got in trouble because so and so was bothering me," but
Mhm.
you can't communicate with them? It's such a difficult life. And it's like I said, it wasn't one, it was so many people, you know? And then the thought is, do I go back to my country? Well, if I go back, it's worse there.
Mhm.
It's worse there. There's no opportunities for work there.
Mhm.
So it's a very difficult life. It's a very difficult life. There's no easy answer or easy solution to it. Um, and without a doubt, there's a community of people burnt out around those circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think it's just it's crazy. I mean, the way you put it all together, and the level of finances and how much money you can make. Where it's like, you know, I'm thankful to kind of where I've gotten in my life that I have the capabilities of being able to say, I would never want to become like a C-level executive because I want to balance my work-life balance to be at home, my kid, and I work from home and I get to take my daughter to soccer and I, do the stuff. And I'm thankful that I'm in a situation, but that's not everybody's case. People do have situations where it feels like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
So, I guess for people who are dealing with this, what are some ways for them to start recognizing that maybe you're starting to get into that burnout state?
Yeah, so burnout is considered to have an insidious onset. an insidious onset, in that it comes in little by little. So there's this story about, if you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you put the frog in warm water and you gradually heat up the water, it'll eventually die, not knowing that the water's boiling it.
Mhm.
I mean, scientifically, that's not correct, but still,
Yeah.
the story goes that way.
It's a cute story, yeah. Well, not
Yeah,
cute, but yeah.
poor frog,
Poor
poor frog.
frog.
Um,
Bendito. Sana sana colita de rana.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the onset of burnout is very similar in that many times people don't even know that it's happening. They don't even realize it's happening. And the most common manifestation that they see is fatigue. Across all of the studies that I have read, fatigue is the most common symptom. So I would say that if a person is going to a job that they know that they're not happy with, and they're constantly tired and tired, and oh, I'm tired at work, and oh, I'm tired at home, this may be an indicator that you're already in burnout, because many times you don't know that it's happening. So I've been stressed, I've been stressed, I've been stressed. Now I'm just tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. Yeah, that might be it. Then when you give that then when you get that I don't really give a crap mentality, like, "Ugh, I don't care about this job. They don't pay me enough for this."
Mhm.
That could also be an indicator that you're in burnout.
And what are some things that you, when you have your patients and you have your people you're coaching, to help them kind of get out of it? Like, what's some of the, I know there's no all of cure. There's not a pill you can take and you do it. But like, what are some things that people could do when they start recognizing some of these things?
Yeah. So the first thing is just to step back and to realize, okay, I'm beginning to notice that there's an excessive amount of fatigue despite how much I'm sleeping. The first step, the first step when I get people is I tell them, go get a checkup. Make sure your checkup is up to date, because there are physical, biological, medical conditions that can mimic some of the symptoms of burnout. So there could be things with that are thyroid related, blood pressure related, um, uh, things with abnormal lipids, so like your cholesterol, things of that nature, diabetes, depression, anxiety. Get your vitamin levels checked out. So the first thing is go for a checkup. Go for a checkup. If all of that is clear, now we move on to the next thing. Let's start to look at, what would you do if you knew that you could not fail? So let's say you presented with this. Okay, here, look, you could do whatever you want right now, and for in terms of work and a career, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What's the answer that comes up for you? Write that down. Now we're going to look at this, and how long has that been? And it's a reasonable question. You want to give an honest answer. You don't want to give something like, oh, if I knew I could not fail, I'd be a NBA all star. Yeah, okay. You're a 68-year-old person. You're not going to get into the NBA just yet. But something realistic. If you knew you could not fail, what would you want to do? So if you give yourself an honest, realistic answer, now, how long has that been there? Most times, the answer that they put is not something new. It's something that's been there for a while. How they do that work may look different now than it did back then, but the core of what they wanted to do still lies within there. So that would be one of the first things I would do, is identify, what would I do if I knew I could not fail, and get a checkup.
Get a checkup. Nice, nice. Oh no, that's good, man. That's good. That's good information. And I think for introspection, like listening to yourself, part of your authenticity aspect of what you're saying is find out what drives you. I'm sure is a big factor on you know keeping you from feeling, because like you said before, stress doesn't mean you're burnt out. You could be stressed and still be happy at the job you are, because you thrive off of stress. Some people thrive off of stress. So
Yeah.
there is a balance that needs to be done for that. So and so as far as a professional coach that you have or whatever, um are there a lot of like burnout coaches? Is it a very niche
I,
field?
I think there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of coaches out there.
Mhm.
There's probably a good amount of burnout coaches. They always talk about the riches are in the niches, or the riches are in the
Yeah,
niches, right?
yeah.
Um, so you'll find a few people out there that specialize in healthcare burnout. Uh, but coaches, like other professions, you really have to have what I describe as an energetic connection with someone. And I think everyone could relate to that one, um, maybe to that one doctor. Oh, if you ever seen you remember it's probably old, considered old now, but remember this TV show House?
Yes.
Okay, so this guy was like a brilliant doctor. He was like a class A jerk. Like
Yeah.
he was like the worst person. So, sometimes you just want someone who's academic and intellectual and just top in their field. And sometimes you just need someone that you can really, vibe with. And I'm sure that there's many coaches out there that are qualified, but not everyone you're gonna vibe with. So there's probably a bunch out there. And it's good that there's a bunch out there. Keep competition is good,
Hmm.
but we're not all built the same.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a lot of programs, and there's some people that just put the moniker, the title of coach without any formal training. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Um, so
So
there's probably a
look
few
for
out
all
there.
those extra letters. Look for all those extra letters at the end of their
Yeah,
name.
look for the letters, and I would even go as far as to say, and this might even be a vote in defense of those people that just threw the moniker of coach on there, that the letters are important because it shows that someone took the time, the dedication, they passed certain standards, some certain exams to prove that they met the standards to be considered a coach, that they're not just advice giving, because
Hmm.
a real coach does not give you advice. A real coach understands that you have the solution to your problems. I'm an expert at active listening and questioning. That's what I do as a coach. I know how to listen, I know how to read between the lines, and I know how to ask you the right questions to challenge your current thinking, to challenge what you consider to be truths, and to help you unlock the answers that are already within you. Because most of the times there are blocks inside. There's 4 blocks that everybody has. That's it. There's only 4 things that block anyone from moving forward. So, more importantly, after the letters is having that initial conversation. Some people call it an intro call, some people call it a discovery call or whatever. Have that conversation. They're usually short, between
Hmm.
15 and, if you get someone generous, 30 minutes. You know, in that time, you'll have your answer if that's the person for you.
Okay.
You'll follow your gut. You'll know.
And so don't leave us hanging on those four things. Yeah, go ahead. Drink your water.
I'm parched.
No, it's all good.
So the four
Yeah.
things, yeah, the 4 energetic blocks. In my coaching discipline, they're known as GAILs, GAIL, GAILs. We put an S because it's multiple, right? So I'll do them in reverse because it goes when I explain them in reverse, it's going to go from least personal to most personal. So the L is limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs is a thought that holds you back. So, an example of this would be someone that says, well, this job does not hire people of my age. Or, what was that? I think it was Mean Girls, one of these movies. They said, like, girls with butts like this don't talk to guys with faces like yours, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, for the person that believes that, then that becomes a limiting belief. So that's one of the things that holds you back from moving forward. So you listen to your internal dialogue. So you want to move forward with, hey, I really want to try and apply for this job. Like, I don't know. There's you know, people they only hire young people there. They only hire young people there. So that's a limiting belief. I would be interpretation. So interpretations is more like mind reading. They're gonna think this. So an example could be, if you're walking into a restaurant with your wife, and your wife for some reason is on crutches, and she's holding her purse on her shoulder, and she's on crutches, and then you say, "Give me your bag." Why? No, I got it. No, just give it to me. Why? No, I got it. Now you feel bad because now you walk into the restaurant like, oh, look at this guy. His wife's on crutches and he wouldn't even hold her bag.
Yeah.
So now it kind of like that gets into your head. So those are the interpretations. A is assumptions. So assumptions is things like um, past results predict future outcomes.
Hmm.
So because I applied for this C-level job 3 times at 3 different companies and I didn't get it, I'm not going to get a C-level job. It's clear at this point I'm not a C-level type person, or I tried three times to talk to this girl, and three times I went up to try and meet someone at a bar, and every time I get shot down. I'm just not the kind of person that they want to talk to. So using past results is predicting future outcomes. That would be your assumptions. And now the last one is G, which is a gremlin. The gremlin is your inner critic. So the gremlin says, I'm not something enough. I call it, my coaching discipline, we call it the gremlin. Some people call it your inner critic. But essentially it's that I'm not something enough voice. So I'm not smart enough. I'm not connected enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not trained enough. I'm not experienced enough. Whatever that voice is, that's the gremlin. And that one is the most difficult to overcome. That's why I went in reverse. Each one becomes a little bit more challenging to uncover because they're more deeply rooted. And the gremlin is very deeply rooted into one's persona, into one's personal experiences. And what I found, and I think I wrote a blog on this, I did write a blog on the gremlin once, is that there's different gremlins. So I find that there's a primary gremlin. Oh, I know what my gremlin is. Cool. Oh, great. We're going to work on it. Fantastic. There's probably a secondary gremlin in there. And there's probably a tertiary gremlin behind that, you know? And these gremlins become so big that you don't see them in front of you, you know? You think it's just the landscape. But those are the 4 blocks,
Nice.
things that hold you back, not to
Well,
leave anyone hanging.
yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate you letting the secrets out. So, so, and one of the things too that to mention is that I think you've started it. You have a podcast now too. And, what's your podcast about, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Yeah, my podcast is called The Business of Being You. So, as you may be able to infer from the title, it's a podcast on authenticity. I started it in 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. And so I'm on my 3rd season now.
Nice.
And it's a podcast about authenticity and the different ways people choose to be authentic. The content has been evolving over the last few seasons. The first 2 seasons the first season was really highlighting people in business who chose to be authentic and go into business with that, whatever their authenticity was. The second one was loosely business and then a little bit more community. And this 3rd season, it's probably less interviews with people and more just me sharing reflections and things to trigger thoughts on what could be holding you back from being authentic or understanding certain aspects of authenticity. So my goal, my goal is to inspire people to really look at that one thing or those things within them that people, just like we were talking about in the beginning, that people have been telling them, hey, you could go somewhere with this. You could start a business with this. You could teach people based on that. Are you really good at that?
Yeah.
So I make these videos and I try not to do hey guys videos. So by hey guys videos, I'm talking about like the ones like, hey guys, how you doing? Or hey guys,
Mhm.
I don't like hey guys videos for me because I feel a pressure of um making an address to a group of people that is acceptable to a group of people. So I try and do videos and content talking to one person. So I say you. I don't say you guys, just you, just one person.
Mhm.
And where there's one, there's many. So when I do the content and the goal with the podcast is just to talk to that one person, then when they hear the topic, they hear the story, they hear the reflection, it's like, that sounds like me, or that really hit home. I'm receiving that. I think I want to move forward with this. I want to try something different, and that's my goal with it, is if I could connect with them there, that one person through the podcast, then that may inspire them to take action, to do something. There's a business coach. She's pretty famous. Her name is Marie Forleo. I don't know if you ever heard of her, but she's pretty well known out there. And she closes her videos with something like, because the world needs that special thing that only you can provide. I was like, damn, I should have came up with that. That was good. That worked perfect for my podcast. But that's essentially the message that I try and share. And I close my podcast out with, you can fail at what you don't want, So you might as well take a chance at doing what you love. So,
Mhm.
that's a big part of the message and the goal that I have with the podcast. It's like there's so many things that we do under this belief that we're supposed to do something. I'm supposed to be this. A good wife is supposed to do this. A good manager is supposed to do this. A good boyfriend is supposed to do this. There's so many supposed tos, and we feel that burden of obligation. And so I want to switch the mindset from this supposed to mindset into I want to do this, and I'm going to take a chance on it. Because look, it's either going to work out, which is fantastic, or it's not. And
Yeah.
you're still where you're at. You had nothing to lose.
Mhm.
So I would say that that's the goal.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm glad it's working out, and I kind of feel the same way when I do my podcast. If one person comes away with something from it, then it's success. And that's how I say it. Uh,
Absolutely.
but I guess now because we kind of get close to wrapping up time, but usually I ask around this time in the podcast, if you could go back and talk to a younger version of yourself and give yourself some advice, what's something you tell yourself?
Invest in Google. I'm sure you've heard, I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yep.
Invest in Google early on.
Hmm.
Um, I would probably tell my younger self, probably what I tell my clients. You are who you are for a reason. You are who you are for a reason. It's not meant to make you feel like an outsider. It's your superpower, it's your secret sauce. And your job is to figure out how to use that to help someone else. And if you help enough people, then everything you wanted, all the finances, all the the community, it all comes with it.
Nice, beautiful. That's awesome. Yeah, it's something that I wish I would have known. I would have thought that way earlier too in my life instead of trying to chase that uh those goalposts that have been set up for me by what I thought I
Yeah,
needed to be, as opposed to trying to be
yeah,
more authentic to who I'm supposed to be. So
yeah.
and then
And that's how it is. That's the thing. That's the thing. And that's one of the other things that I discuss with the people that I work with is that everyone is doing the best they can. And you're trying to figure it out as you went along. All those
yeah.
goalposts. You had good intentions. I had good intentions, and I'm not married anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I tried my best. That obviously wasn't the best for
Yeah.
someone. It wasn't the best for someone. You know, in one of my own episodes that I had recently, I had a conversation with someone around the topic of imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
which is kind of like feeling out of place. And
Yeah.
and after the episode, we just were chatting about some stuff, and we came to realize, like, the major imposter syndrome that exists throughout the world is probably parenthood.
Hmm.
Because a parent, you really are just winging it, and the kids think you got to figure it out, but I think that every good parent knows. It's funny because we were talking about, like, I don't think we've ever met a parent that says, "I'm doing a great job as a parent. I figured it all out. And that I'm the best parent there is." I don't think that I've met any parent that's ever said that.
Hmm.
I think we say, me parents that say, "I think I'm doing a good job."
I
I think you
hope.
kind of check in with the kids. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope I'm doing a good job. But yeah, that's just how it is, and it's not just parenting. It's just like you said, it's following those goalposts in the career, and hopefully, if we're lucky enough, we'll realize that we got to get back on the rails of authenticity. Well, we still have some energy left in us,
Yeah,
you know.
it's funny the way you mentioned about parents too. It's I have there's a joke I from comedian a while back is never buy parenting books from people with kids. If it's not an old person with adult kids that have succeeded in life, they don't know anything about parenting yet. So there's no point in listening to
Yeah,
to
for
their
real.
advice. But
Oh
also,
yeah,
with like the way you said it, I grew up. My dad was strict. My parents were strict. I grew up a certain way, and I thought, that's the way things were. And then there's a lot of stuff that I didn't like the way they did growing up, and that I do differently with my daughter.
Yeah.
Um, and I sit with my dad and we talk, and he's like, the way I see you do stuff with your daughter, I love, and I wish I would have done that with you. And I took that as like
Yeah.
one of the biggest compliments I could ever get from my dad, where he's telling me that he thinks I'm doing it right, and the whole time I'm like, God, I hope I'm not. It's like baking a cake. I'm putting everything together, and I hope it doesn't destroy
Yeah.
itself in the oven.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I've had sit downs with my kids, especially after the separation. After the separation, it's been a few years now, and so I had a good amount of time to myself and done a lot of reflection and a lot of continuing my personal growth. But I've sat with my kids and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I realized looking back that I parented you wrong in this way. And I want to let you know that I acknowledge that I parented you wrong in this way. And I hope that you don't hold on to that. And I want to let you know that I feel like I could have done things differently. And I'm trying to do things differently now, you know? So there's moments like that I just share with the kids. I'm like, yeah, I know I didn't do the best job in this situation, and their kids are kids, we love
yeah.
you, dad. I'm like, all right.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
because I just bought you ice cream,
But
But
it's growth, and reflecting growth towards kids allow them to understand that it's okay for them to admit they make mistakes as well, and they have an opportunity to learn about growth as well. So,
absolutely.
kudos to you on that, man. I'm all with. I'm the same way. I'll be the first one to apologize to my daughter if I blew up to her too much. I'm like, okay, I took that one too far, as opposed to when I was a kid. It was just
Yeah.
you do you. I was like, I don't like to be
Yeah.
that way. So, but
It's true.
but ultimately, I guess my last question for you is, how do you say success in Spanglish?
I say that you are successful if you're true to yourself and you just gave it an honest try and you detach yourself from the outcome. Be clear on who you are and just try it. Share it in the world in whatever way that is. You do that, you're successful. That's it.
Beautiful. Very awesome, man. Thank you so much. Like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. I really hope to have you back in the future for other opportunities. So how can people reach out to you? Where are you located? What's your socials or your website or whatever you want?
Yeah, it's all pretty much the same. So the website's coachmarcob.com, be like boy, coachmarcob.com. If you make it to the website, you'll find links to everything there. But across all the social networks, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I don't even know if I use X, which is formerly known as Twitter, but it's at Coach Marco B as
Mhm.
well.
Nice. Yeah, I know. And I'll have it all in the descript too when this comes out as well. So, but thank you, Marco, so much. I really appreciate you, and I wish you all the best moving forward. So, thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Glad for the opportunity. And I wish you success in this podcast. I know you're going to do awesome, bro.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to get that hustle. So
That's it,
I'm
man.
enjoying every aspect of it so far, and it's been really rewarding and fulfilling. So I
That's
feel
good,
I
man.
feel great about it. So thank you.
I
So
can tell, bro.
thank you. I appreciate it. So, but for everyone else, thanks again for listening. As always, I appreciate you guys taking the time, and hope you'll join me again next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish.